There is not one single example anywhere in the world of a change in organizational performance without some change in leadership. And by change in leadership, I don't necessarily mean replacing the principal. I mean a change in leadership practice. That's how powerful leadership is. In any organization, that's how powerful it is. So what do we actually know? Well, I think it's important to say what we know, because there are things that we know about leadership, and it's important to underline them. The first is, it is the key lever of organizational performance. You take it out, and the chances of you improving your organization are pretty slim indeed. The second is, what we've learned is, in the most successful organizations, you have what's called distributed leadership. Now, I'm going to be talking a bit about distributed leadership in a moment. But let me be clear, when I'm talking about distributed leadership, I am not talking about delegation. I am not talking about giving people tasks you really rather wouldn't do yourself. That's not distributed leadership. That's delegation. And the important point, that what the best leaders do is actually they grow other leaders. You see, we're misinformed if we think that leadership resides in just the formal responsibilities within the organization. It resides elsewhere, and untapping that leadership is absolutely key in terms of raising organizational performance. So let me just say a few things about what it looks like. And I guess you've heard what I've said about the importance of putting learners at the center of everything that we do. And I guess I put learning there at the center of this particular exposition of distributed leadership. There are different versions of this, but mine, I guess, is very much a practical interpretation of what distributed leadership looks like. And more importantly, what it looks like when it makes a difference. I think what we're seeing in some schools is changing structures in order to allow people to work together more effectively. But there's a caution here. We were in a school relatively recently, and one of the principals there had actually physically taken down the walls to allow her teachers to work together more effectively. The walls had gone, but the practice was still the same. So I think there's something that we can do structurally to get people to work together more effectively. But the skills of collaboration, the way people work together, has to be learned, have to be practiced. Otherwise, it becomes sort of loose cooperation. And the analogy I have, I suppose, is when you get a group of students, you can put them on a table. They can be called a group, but they can be working individually. It's exactly the same with teachers. So how do we get teachers to work interdependently, not independently? So moving structures is one way we can do it, but that's necessary but not sufficient. The second thing is about roles, recognizing and giving people more roles, more responsibility. If you just think about the leadership roles as being 3 or 4 people in a school, then you're actually confining the leadership to just those roles. So thinking about roles in a completely different way, the informal leader I talked about in your school, using their expertise, bringing them in, making sure they're part of the leadership endeavor. And this is where I think we're going to be going next, is teams. Easy to say, but hard to do. If you think about the England football team, which I try not to, if you saw the last World Cup, fantastic performers individually, but as a team, atrocious, because they didn't play as a team. And one of the interesting things from the Beyond Expectation studies, the sports teams we looked at, and this is fascinating, sometimes the managers of those sports teams said they wouldn't play their best player because it would demoralize the others in the team. So there's something there about the team configuration that is important. And ultimately what we want to get to is we're not talking about distributed leadership, we're not talking about collaboration, because that's the way we really work around here. It's the cultural way we work around here. Again, I wanted to just emphasize that the evidence shows that collaboration, when it is disciplined, when it is focused, when it is most effective, can make a significant difference to student learning outcomes. The same is true of distributed leadership. There is, however, a paradox, and some principals say to me, yeah, but if I distribute leadership, Alma, what am I doing? Where's my job gone? They've misunderstood what distributed leadership is. Distributed leadership is not giving away power or authority or control. It's saying, as a leader, how can I create the conditions in my organization where people will feel able to offer their expertise? You know, nobody's going to rush up to you and say, can you give me more work? I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it's just not going to happen. But if you have that slightly invitational style, there are people with expertise in your organization today who are just not able to share it or demonstrate it because the opportunity isn't there. So the formal leaders provide the opportunity for the informal leaders to come forward. If you are an autocratic, hierarchical, control freak, no one is going to offer to take on any more responsibility because ultimately they see it as your role, your responsibility. It's not delegation by another name. I think I've sort of commented upon that. And sometimes those two terms are used interchangeably, and that's not helpful. Because the idea of distributed leadership then is giving things away rather than empower others to bring things to you. That's what distributed leadership really is. There is, however, a dark side of distributed leadership. You know, let me just ask a question of everyone here. And you can put your hands up like this if you don't really want to put your hands up like this. How many people here have ever worked for a bad leader? Okay, have a look around the room. Put your hands down. Very rarely talked about. Go to any bookshop, look at the leadership literature. It'll all be, I did it my way. It'll all be, you know, inspirational leadership. It'll all be positive. And yet, if we think about leadership and leaders, that influence can be used for bad as well as good. But it's rarely, rarely written about. It's rarely, rarely expressed. Because some of that leadership is bullying. Some of that leadership is to do with intimidation. Some of that leadership is to do with making people feel small, so they are controlled. So there's a dark side to distributed leadership, like there is a dark side to any other leadership, if it is misused. And I think this is a government health warning, I think, before you go into your sessions. I am not saying distributed leadership is a fantastic thing. It can be, but only with the right conditions. It's not automatically a good thing, a positive thing. It depends. It depends on how the principal sets up the conditions within his or her school for people to take on leadership responsibilities. If the power is misused by the people who are invited to come forward, it won't work. If it's really sort of more workload for teachers, but we'll call it distributed leadership, it's not going to work. It's inauthentic. People will know. If it's to do with overturning the formal leadership in the school, because realistically, it's like collaboration. Once you let collaboration out of the box in your school, I mean authentic collaboration, you can't put it back in. But if you use it wisely, it can be a real positive force for improving performance. And there are some barriers to distributed leadership. If I had the time, I'd ask you to think about what the barriers are. And I can guarantee that the first barrier would be time on the list. How do you get the time to do this, the opportunity, the resources? So distributed leadership and collaboration are not a panacea, but there are some real opportunities if we do it well and if we do it wisely.